In this demo, we'll be discussing how to install the Docker container that will run mTree, and also how to download the auction examples code base so that you can run it inside of the Docker container of mTree. To do this, you'll have to obviously have Docker installed, Docker Desktop. You'll have to have Git installed, and that should be it. So we'll get started here. The first step we're going to do is we'll go and look at the mTree auction examples repository. So it's github.com/gmucsn/mTree auction examples. Then what you'll be able to do is look through and see the instructions on how to install Docker Desktop and so on and so forth. So we have to do two things. So we'll assume that you'll have installed Docker Desktop and Git. But once you've installed Docker Desktop, you'll be able to enter a couple of new commands at the command prompt. And so we'll do that. In particular, we'll do a docker pull mTree/mTree, which will pull down the container or the image that your mTree instance will run in. And we'll describe how that goes. And then we'll also clone this repository. And once we do that, we'll have the code and then we can run everything. So the first step is to open up whatever your favorite shell is. So in this case, we can use PowerShell. So the first step, we're actually going to, we'll pull mTree. So what you'll notice is a bunch of commands like this where it'll download these mTree components or layers in Docker speak. And so what it's doing here is it's just setting up your system so that you can run mTree, kind of whenever you want. When we push updates to the mTree code base, instead of having to install the code and potentially have version mismatches, we'll be using this Docker container system. It's a new technology or newer-ish technology, last 10 years or so, but it's quite handy for stuff like this where it can kind of circumvent any problems that might occur as a result of differences in the environment on different systems. So we're going to continue to pull this down. It should only take another minute or so, and then you'll have this version. And so when we do this in the future, for example, we'll be pushing a new update in the next week or so, and in that when that's done, you'll do another mTree pull. But actually, instead of having to do all of that, it'll actually only download the last one or two, what are called layers, and then you'll be able to move along much faster. Okay, so now that we've done that, the other thing that we have to do is we actually have to clone the repository. So if you follow the steps, it'll provide you the commands. So we can take this. We're just going to clone it. So the next step is we're just going to clone the GitHub repository. So we'll just copy this, and then we'll go back to PowerShell and simply type that in. I'm in c:\repos. You can put it in whatever directory you want. I just think that's a easier place to go personally. So this will clone it. And so at this point, we now have the auction examples, the code, which you've seen from before. So now we can actually run it. So if you go to your Docker desktop, you'll notice that you should now have in the local area this mTree. It's under the images, so mTree/mTree, and you'll see some information there. So what we'll do is we're actually going to hit the run button, and then we need to go into optional settings. So then on the host path, what we'll do is we will select the repository directory that we want. So mTree auction examples. So just put it in that directory, hit select folder, and then inside the container path, just puts /auctions. Okay, and so once you have that, then you can go ahead and run it. And so this will actually start to run here in a second. And then once it's running, you can then go and hit the command line interface, And so this will allow you to, this will actually put you into a Docker container. So this is actually a separate computer running inside your computer in effect. And so now what we're going to do is switch over to our auctions directory. So you'll type in cd space / auctions. You have to type it in exact. We're going to, in the next update, we'll fix some stuff so you'll be able to use either a web interface or use tab completion. So now you're in the auctions directory. So if you're comfortable with Unix commands, you can actually do an ls, which will show you the contents of the directory. In this case, we want to get into the sealed bid common value auction. And so we can do that. Okay, so now we're there. So now what we're going to do is run mTree runner space -i space / config / basic simulation .json. And so then this will put you into the mTree runner. This takes configuration files and then tries to run a simulation. So if you do this, and you can actually start to type in run, and then hit enter and then run it. And then you'll see all sorts of messages go by. So these are all the messages from the auctions that are running. And you can kind of look through them. Obviously, it's pretty quick. But what we can do is actually look through those. So in this case, we can use Visual Studio Code, because what's actually happening is while the mTree system is running in this container, the code for your auction is actually, it remains and resides on your desktop computer in your normal file system. So then in this case, you'll just open the folder as you would anything. So we'll go to c:repos, mTree auction examples. And then once this loads, what we'll notice is inside the sealed bid common value auction, we now have a couple of different log files. Sorry. And so these will, again, this is one particular log format. We'll provide some additional instructions as to how to change the log format around. But you could parse this if you wanted to, or you could do some other stuff. So we'll have a more detailed description of how to deal with the logs and produce more structured logs for your later use in future videos. So if you have any questions, obviously, put them in the GitHub, the issues area. Otherwise, hopefully this was helpful and you can get moving.